So we told you something was going on in Hardin, Montana. So there'll be more on that as it develops. But when I said it was a microcosm, it's a microcosm in that all across the United States, you roll into small towns, the middle of nowhere. I mean, I challenge people here in Texas to just drive around anywhere. But Texas is the worst, but all over the country it's bad. And you'll be driving through the middle of nowhere, cornfields, wheat fields, cotton fields, forest, and you'll see small towns, and then you'll see prisons and detention centers and county detention centers. You'll have counties in Texas that might have 15,000 people in them, and they'll have some 200, 400, 500-bed facility. Hardin, in the whole county, there's only 14,000 people. In Hardin itself, 3,500, very rural community in Montana, and they had a jail built. The taxpayers, of course, get to pay for it, for 450 beds. I mean, that's enough to serve a town of 100,000 people. But not in America. Not in America. In fact, if you look at prison numbers, you go back to New York City 150 years ago, well over 100,000 people living there. They had a much smaller jail than Hardin does. Why didn't we need those jails back then? Why would a town of 100,000 people need a jail for maybe 30 or 40? But now it needs a jail for 5,000, 10,000. And a town of 3,500 needs a jail for 450. Because, ladies and gentlemen, they have changed the laws and rewritten the system where violent offenders are released very quickly, whereas in the old days you weren't. And real criminals are released quickly. Con artists, frauds, they're released quickly. This guy's got a rap sheet of this Captain Hilton. Made up, name, made up, show up in a police uniform, locals bow down because they've been trained to bow to the crown. I mean, it's like in Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is fiction, but it's a good analogy. When he's just stolen the golden idol and the bad guy holds it up to the natives and they all bow down. The same thing with Americans. I mean, you hold up a badge, they just bow. We've been trained to be slaves. But this is our economy now in this society. That's what most of the new scholarships are in colleges. ITT Technical isn't ITT Technical anymore. When you go to newspapers and magazines, the most prominent ads you see next to drug ads, next to Prozac ads for the drugged out public, are ads to become a security officer, to become a police officer, to join the CIA, to join the FBI. All of that's growing while the rest of our economy dies. And this is a conscious decision by groups controlling the government to vertically integrate the economy into a police state. And then private groups are privatizing all these major prisons. And you've got SCIC and other big Pentagon groups that are private that do more spying than the 15 government spy agencies. There's 15 major agencies. Defense Intelligence, Naval Intelligence, CIA, NSA, list goes on and on. The press reports that upwards of 70% of the funding now goes to private groups. And they're spying on you locally. And it's all illegal. It's all, and I don't care if they say it's legal. It violates the Bill of Rights and Constitution. It's criminal. And so that's the type of atmosphere where for the last few months you could have foreigners driving around in police cars that weren't even incorporated, running police operations and taking over a private prison to put the citizens in as the new economic development. It was paid for by the taxpayers as an economic development. That's what they're doing. That's how they operate. Now, the microcosm doesn't stop there. As you drive across the country and all we do is put people in prison. It doesn't stop there. That's at the local grassroots level. It's also a microcosm what's happening in Hardin, Montana to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve shareholders are predominantly European. That's on record in the last investigation they had in the 30s on the Federal Reserve in Congress. But it's never been audited. Started in 1913. And the private run-for-profit Federal Reserve is just like Captain Michael Hilton It's a complete fraud. He puts on a police uniform, puts government decals on his car, starts patrolling, starts going to city council as the police chief. Oh, we've now gotten the city council record. He's been doing that. Doesn't matter. It's the same thing. The private Federal Reserve came in, bought off our Congress in 1913, was given the power to issue currency and credit. They then used our money and our wealth to buy off the rest of the planet, and now they're done with us and they're imploding this nation. And I sit here every day like a resident of Hardin, Montana, saying, what is a group of foreign bankers doing coming into town and not just taking over illegitimately, but running things into the ground by design? It's a fraud. But just like in Hardin, the local establishment are on the news. You can just Google American Police Force and watch national news pieces, local news pieces, you name it, to your heart's content. They're going, so what if he's a felon? So what if he's a foreigner? So what if he lied about everything? We like him, we're sticking with him. They won't admit they're wrong because they wanted to run the private prison. They wanted to have power over people. And that's why your local governors and the Congress and your legislatures and your local Kiwanis Club and your local Rotary Club, all their leaders get wined and dined by these other elite groups, just a pat on the head, a bone, and they feel like they're part of the power structure and they get off on it. Just like our presidents get off on being invited to dine with the Queen, and they'll bow down to her and toast her and her stupid crown. Because people want to feel like they have power. And they don't want to admit they've been conned or bamboozled. And that's all that's happened to this nation. But there's another microcosm, not just the denial. It's the fact that you've got this foreign Federal Reserve engaging in predatory behavior against us. And you've got these little jails all over the country engaged in predatory activity. I mean, here is Agency French Press. Got another one here from MSN. U.S. economic decline forges new world order. And they say that the U.S. must fall for the world government to be born. And they're talking about how great all of this is. And if you Google the term New World Order, there are tens of thousands in the news section alone as they all announce the same thing. Isn't it great? The crisis is redrawing the world. Here's another one. World Bank welcomes new economic order from the ashes of crisis. London Guardian. This is just what I saw today, not even looking. This just happened to be linked up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com by my webmasters. I wasn't even looking for this. Now, remember, I made films 10 years ago saying they're going to stage terror attacks, bring in a police state in the name of fighting foreign enemies. Then they're going to implode the economy and bring in a new global currency. You'll still have the dollar, but it'll be pegged to a new global standard and controlled by a private group in Brussels. It's now announced. How did I make films 10 years ago saying that? Because I was reading government blueprints and documents. They're bragging now. They wrote white papers saying they were going to stage terror attacks on the order of Pearl Harbor. They did. And now they admit the entire Homeland Security system is for you. I was in Hardin, Montana, and no exaggeration, more than half the people on side streets, at gas stations, up on the highway. I had people coming up to us in Billings. But I mean, about half of Hardin were fans of the show. Then we had the local boss hogs, anybody who had any cousin or anybody in power was just strutting around like they were royalty, should have all been wearing crowns. They were all violently angry at us, but that was the minority, a group that rules the town. Scott in Connecticut, you're on the air.
Hey, what's up, Alex? Honored to talk to you. Look, I got to say, man, you're fired up tonight. When I listen to your podcast, it gets me fired up because I like to press out 315 on the Smith machine, just listening to you. Seriously, I saw something today that was really kind of bothersome. I was down at the local, I don't want to say X-Mart store.
Well, why not say where you were at? Tell us where you were at.
Kmart. I can't believe they're still open, but I was at a Kmart, and there was a police department display. They had the cherry picker out. Kids were going up for rides. A couple cop cars.